Class notes for adding and subtracting rational expressions. Well, in our first example here, we were adding 2 over 5x plus 3 over 10x to the third power. We first have to find the common denominator. We have 5x and 10x as our denominators, so we factor them to primes. We have 5x times x, which is factored to the prime. 10x becomes 10x to the third power becomes 5x. 5 times 2 times x. That gives us the primes. We look at what we have in our first denominator that is not in our second. We look at what we have in our first denominator and say, well, we're missing the times 2 and then the x times x. So we have to multiply those to find the LCD, which is 10x to the third power. Now, given our denominator, 10x to the third power, we have to multiply the numerator of our first term by 2x to the second power, because again, over here we found that 2x to the second power is what we need in that denominator to and the numerator to get 10x to the third power. Now that we have we have the 4x squared, we can write it over our common denominator. So 4x squared plus 3 over 10x to the third power. In our next example here, we have 5 over 6x squared plus 4 over 5x to the fifth power. Again, finding the common denominator is similar. We factor both the denominators to their primes. And we look at what is not in the particular denominators that is in the other denominator. So in our first denominator, 6x squared, well, we don't have the 5 and then the extra x times x times x. So we already have x times x, but we're missing 3x or x to the third power as a factor there, and the 5. So we multiply that to get our LCD of 30x to the fifth power. Now it's a matter of changing the numerators of both. Again, looking at the denominator 5x to the fifth power and looking at what we don't have in our prime factors is the 2 times 3, which is over from here. So again, we multiply that to this side to get our 30x to the fifth power. Now again, back to our numerators. Well, we said that we needed 5x to the third power in our first term numerator. So that's what we do there. And then we needed the 2 times 3, which is 6, and as a factor of that second term numerator. And that brings us to 25x to the third power plus 24 over 30x to the fifth power. Here we have an example of adding, and we have expressions in both of the terms. So finding the LCD is basically multiplying the x plus 8 times the x plus 7. So that's our denominator. And then as far as our numerator is concerned, we multiply the x plus 7 times the x plus 2 here, and then the x plus 8 times the x minus 4, which is what we see here. And using the FOIL method to multiply both of the terms, we come out with 2x squared plus 13x minus 18 over x plus 8 times x plus 7. And in a similar example, we have our denominator h plus 3 times h plus 7 in the first term, then h plus 3 times h plus 5. Well, we have an h plus 3 in both of them. So what we're going to do is multiply what's not in both of them. So over on this side, we're going to multiply this side by the h plus 7. And then what we're going to do over here is multiply this by the h plus 5. So that gives us the LCD of what we see here. So again, multiplying this numerator for the first term by h plus 5 and the numerator for the second term by h plus 7. We FOIL both the terms and then simplify by combining like terms to get 2h squared plus 10h minus 18 over our common denominator that we determined earlier. And then in our final result here, we factor out a 2. So because 2 can go into each one of the terms, factor that out. In a subtraction example, we follow a pretty similar path as the last two. But in a subtraction example, this minus sign has to be distributed to both the y and the 3. So what we did is we come out with our LCD, and then following our process of multiplying our numerators by what was missing in our denominator. But here we distributed that negative up there to here, and now we have negative 3 minus 3 as our numerator for that part. And then going to factor or using our FOIL method for both terms, this is what we get. And by simplifying it or combining like terms, we have negative 8y minus 34 up top, and we can factor out a negative 2 out of that. And then in our last example, we have a problem that we're going to simplify involving having fractions in the numerator and the denominator. So again, finding our LCD for both the numerator and the denominator. Here, x is going to be our common denominator. Same thing here, x is going to be our common denominator. We multiply the first term by x and the denominator first term by x. And this is what it looks like after we simplify the numerator and the denominator. Just rewriting it in terms of a division problem so that we can know that we need to change it to multiplication by flipping the second term. So right here is where we flip the second term, then the x canceled out, leaving us with 3x plus 6 over 2x minus 5.